Hello and welcome to Changing World. My name is Anthony Smith, and my guest today is a man with quite a number of unusual life stories under his belt. Wayne McFarland wandered away from a small Midwestern town some years ago. With no planning at all, his history is one of stumbling into one bog after another, from the Dakotas to California, from Pamplona to Paris. His main claim to fame is mostly and surprisingly not being dead, plus getting involved with a lot of strange stuff, usually unwillingly or by accident. Now, just to quote a paragraph from Wayne, "Yeah, this indeed is a memoir of sorts. If shark fishing in one's underwear, roping a bear, getting drunk with your grandfather, or losing 10 grand at the Hollywood sign is a memoir. The day Johnny Cash hit on my wife is on the roster as well, for the only name drop in all the stories. There's also a thing about getting shot in Arkansas and a road trip with a monkey. I can't deny these were life-shaping events, but truth be told, they all happened under the heading of whoops." Now, Wayne, apart from the tragedies you've endured, I do detect quite a bit of humour injected into your writing style. Would you say that's important?
Hey, Anthony. Yeah, I think so. My theory is people would rather laugh than cry. And, I've always felt there's a lot of stuff out there about pain and suffering and sorrow. And, I mean, we all know it's there. We've all experienced in our life. But I don't know about you, Anthony, but I am not really excited about reading a book or going to a movie and coming away depressed. Or or weeping into my bandana. I'd rather keep it light. So yeah, I try to inject what humor I could into some pretty weird stuff, but most things are funny.
Yeah. So obviously you can see the funny side of things, and even the times when you got, you had to take a hit somehow, you picked yourself up and you carried on.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And people would ask me, how'd you get involved with all that stuff? And I think probably the same way you got involved with being a broadcaster is one day the opportunity came along and you said, well, sure. I've never done that before, but yeah, I'll take a run at that. Why not?
Why not? Indeed, yeah.
Yeah. And so much of it, I think, running into fun things in life is just getting out there. I know that sounds ingenuous, but it really is true, I think, that you get out there and then when an opportunity presents itself, of course you don't know how to do it. You don't know how to do it until you've done it. So
exactly.
Just take a whack at it.
Yeah. Well, you seem to have done that quite a bit. Now, you mention, obviously, the book is really like a memoir of your life, all the trials and tribulations you've been through. Now, why do you think most memoirs lack that entertainment value?
Well, how I came about it, is this where I can do a shameless plug for my book?
I'm not going to stop you.
Tales from the Day. Go to Amazon. Jeff Bezos needs the money. So that's what you can. And I came about the book, Anthony. We had a business here in the States, and we sold it. And I've always loved to read, particularly memoirs and biographies. So just for no particular reason, I started reading memoirs. And Anthony, I got to tell you, most memoirs really suck. I mean, they're really bad. And they all kind of have the same, I looked toward the mountains and I shaded my eyes and said, there lies my destiny. No, it doesn't work like that.
Not quite.
Yeah, most of the time, you just stumble into things, and people with writing memoirs like to try and pretend that it was all planned and some kind of route in life. No. There was an American humorist who wrote one time that when you put down all things you did not do and leave out the things you did do, that's a memoir. And I think most memoirs fall into that category. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write about pitching a loan shark and losing money at the Hollywood sign and blowing town with the monkey, because that's what happens. I would be willing to bet you, Anthony, if 10 years ago, 15 years ago, somebody said, in 2020, you're going to be a broadcaster talking with some weird guy in Colorado, you would have gone,
what?
I don't think so. Exactly. And that's really how things happen.
Yeah. Everything is a bit random. There's always a random element, to a lot of stuff. I mean, they say obviously planning is everything, and that planning is is important, but you can't always plan, can you, Wayne?
No, you can't. I mean, Eisenhower, you and I were chatting about the WW2 a bit, who said that no plan you ever conceive of is going to work, but without a plan, you'll lose for sure. so yeah, it's important to plan, but you gotta realize that when you're executing your plan, you put yourself out there, and the universe doesn't just let you execute whatever thing you've come up with. The universe is going to throw things at you and push back and get you involved with all kinds of strange stuff. Usually, what you didn't intend to do in the first place.
Right. Well, that sounds like the story of your life, doesn't it? That what you just said there.
Yeah, it's like the old joke, Anthony, about the guy who said, all I wanted to do was drain the swamp. Where did all the alligators come from? And that's kind of my theory on stuff.
Yeah. So let me ask you a few questions just to get the ball rolling. Now, this thing we got here about you pitched the loan shark. What's that all about?
Well, we here in the States, you're podcasting right now, I believe, and in the States, some years ago, the United States was covered with little broadcast radio stations, and they were like carnivals. I mean, they were all very small. Now they've all been bought out, but they were all very small. And the owners were half business people and half con men. Because when you owned a little radio station, you never paid for anything. You couldn't sell your advertising. So what you do is go to a restaurant and say, I tell you what, I'll give you X number of dollars worth of advertising, which you haven't sold anyway, if I can have 100 meals at your restaurant. It's called trading, and until the tax people figured out what was going on, everybody lived in broadcasting very well. So I had a friend of mine who was quite a character, and one day he called me and he said, I just bought a little radio station in Las Vegas. Now, this radio station is what was called a daytimer. Its signal was weak, and it would cover the town only in the daytime. At night, you couldn't even hear it. But it covered Las Vegas. So my friend said to me, listen, I got this great idea. We're not going to take any money for advertising. He couldn't get it anyway. We'll take trade. And then we'll sell the trade. We'll sell the cars and we'll sell the furniture and stuff that we get by trading advertising for it. And he said, we'll live like kings and you're going to help me. And I thought, sounds like a good idea to me. So off I went to Las Vegas. And Anthony, we did live like kings. I mean, we went to the shows and, ate at the finest restaurants and did all this stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't pay your mortgage with restaurant meals. Take the money. So one day my friend calls me in his office and he says, we're out of money. No surprise there, right? And he said, we're going to go and we're going to pitch Big Jim at Big Jim's bail bonds for an all-cash contract to advertise. Now, Anthony, I was new to Las Vegas, and that was during the days when there was a lot of mob action there. And even I knew that Big Jim was the biggest loan shark in town. And I said, I don't know if that's the best idea I've ever heard. And my friend, my friend said, no, it'll be great. I even did a sample commercial. So he plays me this sample commercial, and it was beautiful, Anthony. The stentorian disc jockey voice and upbeat music in the background talking about if you ran afoul of the law, call Big Jim at Big Jim's bail bonds and he'll get you out of trouble. So I said, okay, well, that sounds pretty good. So off we go. And we go in the conference room, and here's Big Jim and this really bad dresser young guy who was his son, Little Jim. And Little Jim was reputed to be as mean as a rattlesnake. So anyway, my friend starts in, and he's interrupted by the kid who says, I don't even know why you're here. We're not gonna buy any advertising. This is really stupid. So my friend says, no, I even made a sample commercial for you. And the kid says, we don't want to hear any stupid. And Big Jim holds up his hand like the Godfather and says, play it. So my friend pushes the button, right? And instead of the commercial he played for me, out comes my friend's voice, backed up with minor key organ music. And here was the dialogue. Have you killed your wife? If you have money in the bank, here at Big Jim's bail bonds, we don't care. Have you hit your mom with an axe? If you have equity in real estate, here at Big Jim's bail bonds, we don't care. And I'm telling you, Anthony, that kid popped out of that chair like a gopher coming out of a hole. And I'd never seen anybody's eyes actually bulge. But he started screaming at it, and he only stopped when he heard a strangling noise, and Big Jim was laughing so hard, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. So he looked at us and he said, boy, that took some grit. That was really stupid, but that took some grit. He said, okay, I'll give you your deal. All cash in 1 year. So as my friend's fumbling for his pen and the contract, Big Jim says, there's only two conditions. And my friend said, what? What are they? And Big Jim said, first, you never put anything on the air that I haven't approved. And second, you give me that commercial, and it better be the only copy. Done. So I thought, Anthony, that Big Jim asked for that commercial so he could destroy it. But I was told sometime later that Big Jim played that commercial at every party he ever attended right up until he went to jail.
Well, there you go. What a story.
Big Jim. Yeah.
Yep, that's one of them, isn't it? Let me just select a few other things here, which I've just made a few notes here. How did you manage to lose $10,000 at the Hollywood sign? What's that all about?
Well, this was our big shot. I had come to California totally broke, and we got this little business started. And this is a story directly from my book, Tales from the Day. Oh, I love it when I do that. And we had this little business where we would do sales commercials for businesses, and they were like slideshows. So there's a little machine that would play pictures, and then there'd be a audio track with music, and buy our widgets. They're the best widgets ever made. So in one show, for one client, we used one of the first lasers. It was that long ago, to kind of do some effects and stuff. So I'm sitting in my little 2-room office, and the phone rings. And this guy says, "Are you the ones with the lasers?" And I said, "Yeah, that's us." And the guy said, "Listen, we have a contract for the TV show to unveil the new Hollywood sign, which had just been a wreck." Mm-hmm. And he said, "We were thinking that what could be better than having lasers with our searchlights?" And I said, "I can't think of anything better than that." So they hired us, right?
Right.
Now, this is on top of a mountain, Anthony. There's no power, there's no water, and I didn't have any lasers. So I went to the company that made the lasers and just lied like a trooper and told them if they'd lend us a laser, and then I asked for 2, we'd give them screen credits. Now, I had no authority to do that. I mean, this was live television. It was CBS, but this was my moment. The new Steven Spielberg was going to arise from the ashes of myself, right? So anyway, we got a water truck and a power truck on credit, and the show was live to, like, I don't know, 50 million, 100 million people, and then tape delay for the rest of it. And I just got married, so I said, "Hey, Gloria, my wife, let's go. We're doing the Hollywood sign." So now, Anthony, it never sleets in Southern California. That's like an ice rain.
Yeah.
But it sleeted that day. And the lasers at the time had to be a certain temperature. If they were too hot, too cold, a big tube running through them would explode. And each tube, $5,000, right? So the live show was going on, and the key entertainer was Lola Falana. Now, she's gone now, and I had never really met her, but I loved the concept of this woman. She had her own song, and she won in a baccarat game a hunk of an American baseball team, which she later sold for $14 million. I mean, I loved her, and I didn't even know her, right? So she's singing and dancing, doing a great job and shit. And now the unveiling of the Hollywood sign, it's our moment, right? And it's sleeting. So we fired up the first laser, and it blew up right away. So there's $5,000. Boom. And so my wife and I were holding an umbrella over the second laser, which we then fired up, and a few beams came out, and that one blew up. And so the evening ended with my wife and I sitting at the base of the giant H on the Hollywood sign, which was the letter from which an entertainer called Peg Entwistle had jumped to her death when she missed a movie part back in the 30s. Should have been a warning to me. So we're sitting there, and I turned to my wife and I said, "Well, we just tanked in front of 100 million people, but at least we get paid tomorrow." So the next day I call up the company that had hired us, and I said, "Listen, I want to come down and get our check." And the guy on the other end of the phone starts laughing, and he says, "Well, good luck with that. They just declared bankruptcy." So I had my head in my hand. I don't remember if I was weeping, probably. And Gloria comes in, my wife, and she grabs my elbow and she says, "You have got to see this." And it was a copy of the Los Angeles Times, one of the biggest newspapers in the nation, next to the New York Times. And they had a review in there of the show, and the biggest part of the review was raving about us. It went on and on about the lasers flashing over Mount Lee and the Hollywood sign. What had happened was our bankrupt employer, their searchlights had illuminated the Hollywood sign, but all the reporters and others had gone in the trailer where there was an open bar when it started to sleet. And so they gave us credit for something we never did. It was the best review I ever got, and we made a lot of money with it. But $10,000. I don't remember how we recovered from that, but we did.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, again, you couldn't have foreseen that. You couldn't have predicted it. It was just one of those things that tripped everything up.
That's it. That's how stuff usually happens.
Yeah, yeah, and there you were, not knowing what to do next, probably.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah, well, these are really unusual stories, and of course, you've put all these into the book, which you've already mentioned the title of.
Tales from the Day.
Exactly. Now, I was just a bit intrigued because I thought you mentioned somewhere that you've had one or two paranormal experiences. Is that correct?
Well, really the only real paranormal experience I had was being interviewed on a couple of paranormal shows, which, since I put the book out, which is kind of surprising to me. Maybe they thought some of these stories were a bit surreal, but no. The closest one I ever had is when we had offices for a while in a small rural state here in the United States called South Dakota, and I grew up back there, and it's a different culture really. It's my first time in South Dakota. We're driving down the road, and here's a road crew standing there, and we're looking at this guy, and Anthony, he looked like a parody of every rural story you've ever seen. No tooth, Now, South Dakota is flat, and there's not many people. So I'm looking around, and I grew up in a little town back there. And I said, boy, you can see all the way to the horizon. You ever seen any aliens riding on a flying saucer? And Gloria's starting to hit me. Shut up. And the guy goes, yeah, I have actually. Now, people in South Dakota have a weird sense of humor, so I thought maybe this guy was pulling our leg. And I said, really? Well, tell me about it. And by now, Gloria is saying, roll up the window. And so the guy kind of leans in our car and starts telling us in rather gory detail about riding on a flying saucer and being probed and all the stuff you read about. And I'm looking at him, and Gloria's looking at me, and I'm going, hey, I'm just talking to this guy, right? And so finally, I told the guy, look, we got to go, And then he looked at me, and he looked over at my wife, and he looked back at me, and he said, and I know the location of every house of ill repute in South Dakota. And as we drove away, Gloria looked at me and said, if you ever do that again, I'll hit you so hard, you'll think you're on a flying saucer. But that's about as close as I ever came. And there's one farmer out there, by the way, who started coming into town and talking about speaking to aliens, and they were landing in his fields and all this stuff, and he was ostracized, as you can imagine. And one day he rolled into town, a little town that I know quite well out there, and he said, they've told me where to dig a well for water, which will not only water all my fields, but all the fields close to me with farmer friends. And of course, they laughed him out of town, and he got a drill rig. And by gosh, Anthony, he hit water in an amount that nobody had seen before.
Wow.
And really strange. So everybody didn't exactly invite him over for dinner, but they tolerated him in town after that. It's a strange area of the country.
Right. Well, you can't argue with that, can you?
Oh. I mean, he to his dying day, he swore that's what happened, and who am I to argue, right?
Yeah. That's right. That's well, the mind boggles.
Yeah.
Now, what's this about? You went on a date, and you ended up in a plane crash. How on earth did that happen?
Well, it happened because I thought I was too smart for my own good. I was in the military back in the Midwest of the United States, where it gets very, very cold. A lot of snow, cold. So I had a date in a town probably 5 hours by car away if the roads were good. So it was a New Year's Day party. So New Year's Eve, a big blizzard came in and shut down the roads.
Oh.
And I was in the Air Force. So I was at an air base. And at that time, hitchhiking in small planes was in vogue. People wouldn't assume that you were a serial killer. So if you were younger and you offered to clean the plane or something, sometimes you could hook a ride to wherever they were going. So the runways were all covered with snow. So I thought, well, you know, and I went to the tower anyway, and here's this guy and his kid shouting at each other that they had to get to Minneapolis, but the runways were snowed over. You couldn't get your plane out. They had a small plane. So I went up to him and I said, listen, if I could get a runway cleared so you can take off, because Minneapolis, the town they had to fly to where I wanted to go, was clear. Snow hadn't hit there. That if I cleared the runway, will you let me ride with you? And they looked at me like the alien had just popped out of my belly, right? And they said, sure. So I called a buddy of mine, a sergeant, who had control of all the equipment at the airport, including snowplows.
All right.
And I asked him if he could take a snowplow and clear a runway. And he started shouting at me, what are you, crazy? That's unauthorized use of military equipment. I could get into a lot of trouble, and what's in it for me? So we negotiated a fee of 2 cases of beer, and he cleared the runway.
Okay.
So the pilot and his buddy were beside themselves. And they said, look, give us 5 minutes. Come on out and hop in a plane, and we're off. And that's what happened. Off we went. So we're flying along. And all of a sudden, the pilot starts yelling and screaming and beating on the dashboard of the plane. And his son, as it turns out, the other one was yelling at him. And I noticed we didn't have an engine. The engine had stopped.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and we were over the fields, and we were starting to go down.
Mm.
So the guy's calling a mayday, and I don't want you to ever go through it, but they say that it gets very quiet in a plane if people know it's going to go down. It does. It gets very, very quiet. And so we're going down, and the pilot's just weeping and screaming and turning the key, trying to get the engine to start. Nothing. And I swear to you, Anthony, we couldn't have been 3 feet off the deck when the engine popped and caught. And we came back up, and the engine was stuttering and coughing all the way back to the airport. And we landed okay, and it went in the hangar. And I was standing there, and a mechanic came over and said, you know, he didn't know I'd been in the plane. He said, those fools should all be dead. And I said, well, I'm glad they're not. And he said, you know what happened? He said, the idiot flying the plane didn't pre-flight it. He didn't look at it because it was cold out. Well, snow from the blizzard had packed the engine compartment full of snow.
Right.
So the engine got hot, melted, and that was that.
Oh.
So, so I went back to the tower, and here were about 10 pilots, all of whom were going to take off because the runway was clear, right? So when I told them I'd been in the plane, they'd heard the mayday. And what had happened, I got offered like 5 rides to Minneapolis. So I made it to the party. And my date comes up to me and said, geez, I'm glad you're here, but I didn't think you'd make it because of the blizzard. Did you have any trouble? And I said, no, not a bit. No problem.
Yeah, well, you certainly kept your composure there, didn't you, Wayne?
Well, you should have heard me screaming in the airplane.
Yeah. Now, another curious one I've got written down here is you had some kind of run-in with Johnny Cash, the famous singer, who actually came on to your wife. I mean, I don't want to make a comment. I want to hear it from you.
Well, based on our laser fame from the Hollywood sign, I got a call from a guy who was staging the Country Music Awards, which is a big show in this country. And he said, "We need some lasers and other special effects to start the show. Can you do it?" What do you think I said? I said, "Sure, sure, we can do that." So Gloria was getting her doctorate in molecular biology. So she was really not a... Yeah. You've heard the term marrying above your station? Anthony, I'm living proof. It can't be done.
Right.
So anyway, I told her I'd fire. So we went into this little, well, in Oklahoma, a place called Tulsa, which is a big country western, very western type town. And when I arrived, two of the staging people from a big television network, CBS, were having a fist fight on the stage. And I figured, if that's how it's going to start, I don't know how it's going to end. As it turns out, the producer of the show was a member of a singing family, quite popular, but they'd never produced a show, so they didn't give people time enough to set up their equipment. It'd be like you trying to do a podcast without having your audio working. I mean, you've got to get it all working before you can do it, right? So we were going to open the show, and because we didn't have time to set up, what we did live on TV, all this barfing out on TV, right? We set off a bunch of fireworks that we had, and then shot the lasers through the fireworks, and it kind of looked okay, you know? I mean, so when it was all over our part, I went, of course, to the backstage bar to kind of settle my nerves, and Gloria, my wife, said she wanted to stay out behind the curtains and watch the rest of the show. I mean, there's some pretty big names there. And I had a beer, and I came out, and Anthony, here's this huge group of people standing in a circle around a tall guy dressed in black, and my wife. And she's kind of smiling and shaking her head at him, and I'm looking at this going, what is this now? And finally everybody kind of wandered away, and I went up to Gloria and I said, "What did he say to you?" And she just kind of looked at me and smiled, and she said, "Oh, a bunch of nonsense." And, you know, Anthony, I have tried, we've been married a long time now, I have tried for many, many years to get her to tell me what Johnny Cash said to her, and she won't do it. I am convinced that on my deathbed, she's going to come in and say, "Now I'll tell you what he said," right? But anyway, she just said, "No, he just said a lot of nonsense." And I said, "Do you know who that was?" Now, she's a biochemist, right? And she said, "No. Who was it?" Yeah. And I said, "It's Johnny Cash." Yeah. And she said, "Who's Johnny Cash?" Oh. So that was it.
So that was it. That explains it then. You can't blame her. You can't blame her.
No. You know, so it was just some random guy dressed in black, you know. I mean, it was, boy, I got to tell you. Now, who would have planned that, right? Just like the other planned stuff in my book, Tales from the Day, available on Amazon. Yes, yes.
Well, I must say, Wayne, that's a good title for a book, and I'm assuming it's an original title.
It is.
Yeah, yeah.
Give all your listeners and you a tip. Remember, the holidays are approaching. So if you buy 30 or 40 copies of the book, your holiday shopping is done.
Right.
One fell swoop. I just pass them out.
Yeah. Do we get a discount?
Of course. And people will be giving you Yorkshire pudding till you die. It'll be great.
It'll be great. It'll be great. Okay, well, thanks for the tip. So, listen, Wayne, was there any other story that really stands out? Something that I've missed, or something that you'd like just to get off your chest and share with the people listening?
Well, I think, what I try to do, and there's 27 stories in the book, and I like to think that most of them are humorous, But we're seeing, right? I think the thing that really changed my view on things as much as anything could was, right now the whole world is going through and looking at racial equality and people treating each other better and and I was raised in a small town where it was just not. I mean, it was like a small village in England, I suppose. Everybody was the same ethnicity. Everybody was white. I mean, there were just no minorities, right? And so one day, three friends of mine and I decided, this was during a great deal of racial turmoil in this country, we decided we were going to go to New Orleans and party for Mardi Gras. That was our motivation, right? So we all got in my old car, and it was about, I don't know, a 3-day drive from where we were to Louisiana. So off we went, and we were almost there when one night we were driving straight through. We got pulled over by some car with searchlights. We thought it was police. And we pulled over and stopped, but nothing happened for quite a while. So finally we started to pull away, and they opened up on us, and they shot me and shot my friend. And,
oh my God.
And they thought we were coming down south to help register black voters. And kind of knocked me a little loopy. And the next thing I remember, I looked out the back window, which was no longer there, and I could see little pinpoints of light from the other car. They were shooting at us, and they were catching us. I mean, we were losing the biggest race of our lives, but before they got us, we made it to a small exit and turned off. And now we're in the deep South in the United States, which the hatred and so forth in some of those areas exists to this very day. So we reported the shooting to the police, like you do if you grew up in a place where law and order pretty much prevails. And the local officer came down and pulled his gun and threw us in jail. So the upshot of it all is they held us for a week, told us they were going to kill us, and all this stuff. And finally, I got a call out when a new jailer came on who didn't know apparently what was going on. And it wasn't 20 minutes after my call. Then the local sheriff came down and was very placating and had our wounds looked after. Now, it'd been a week, right? Like it was going to do any good then. And so we got a lawyer and they had a hearing, right, in this little jail. And our lawyer goes, when do you want these kids to come back? You've accused them. They accused us of all kinds of stuff. And the local law enforcement person said, well, why don't you give me a call and we'll see what we can work out. Well, it's not exactly how you expect justice to run, right? And there was a local lawyer there who took us out in the hall, and he said, will you people get the hell out of here? He said, just leave. Your car is downstairs. By nightfall, you could be hundreds of miles away, which I thought was a pretty clear indication we should be out of town by dark. So we made it back home, and what got us out of jail was my parents had called the president of our college and the newspapers and whatever, and the president of where we were going to school called his friend who was the governor of our state, like a member of parliament. And that governor called that little jail and said, we know you've got our people down there and they better not be hurt. So it really bothered me, Anthony, when I got back, because I was really young then, but even I knew that for the president of our college, who didn't really know us, to risk all that political capital to have, his friend, the governor, very powerful guy, hold that jail was an enormous risk, because if we really had done something, it would have been terrible politically for everybody involved. So I asked for an appointment to see the president, and he saw me and he said, "What can I do for you?" And I asked him, I said, "Why did you do it?" But you took a terrible risk. And Anthony, I expected him to say something like, "Well, you seem like fine young men, you know." But he didn't. He just got up from his desk and he went over and looked out the window, and it was raining, you know. And he told me for his family, where his entire family, including his mother, who was a singer in the Frankfurt Opera, were killed by the Nazis. He was Jewish. And he and his brother made it out through a horrendous trail under the barbed wire into France and then on to England. And when he turned back from the window, he was crying, and he said, "I swore to myself from that moment on, I would never, never, never stand by, ever." And changed my life. I'll never forget that. But I will tell you one thing, that if you are, you know, a college or ex-college guy, and you want the greatest pickup line in the entire world, there's nothing that will beat, "Hey, you want to come see the bullet holes in my car?" I'm telling you, you know, as a pickup line, it's perfect.
Well, there's not that many people who can back that up, is there?
I never filled in the bullet holes either. I left them. There were like 12 of them in my car, right?
Oh, right.
But Anthony, I used to sand them occasionally, so they always look new.
Oh, I see. Right. So that was your kind of trophy of the experience.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, I must say these are stories that, you know, you couldn't really make them all up, could you? I mean, it's you know.
I don't have that kind of imagination.
No. I think we accept that you have really gone through these experiences in your life, and that's what's shaped your personality, isn't it?
And you can live the stories with me through my book, Tales from the Day. Sorry, Anthony, I couldn't resist.
I think we all know the title by now.
Okay.
But well done for driving your point home. So,
Thank you.
Wayne, you know, with all this craziness in the world at the moment, what is your take on where all this is leading us? Because look, to be honest, you did make a few points earlier on to me, which we've not yet shared with any of the viewers, but many people are concerned. Look, what's happening to the economy? I mean, we can't just say, yes, it's important to save lives, but what about, you know, the future of the whole economy?
Well, I think what we're looking at is what this pressure point of the virus has done has really revealed a lot about a lot of people. I mean, to get to your point about the economy, the question is taking the economy worth lives? Well, my response to that is I think the lives are more important. And also and I'm speaking as someone who's owned a small business, and I know lots of people who do, and my heart just breaks for them. But, you know, look at what Britain went through during the war for years. And the total run of this, where the vaccines are coming, I have no doubt. So the total run of this will probably be a year, maybe. And the total crash of the economy probably started in April. And my own opinion is that, you know, it's devastating to a lot of people. I mean, it's affected my family and I as well. But on the flip side, if someone dies, there's no chance they're going to come back. But if you got to close your restaurant, there's a chance the restaurant will come back. And I happen to, two things I think. One is I think human beings are enormously resilient. That once we have a vaccine and this thing is leveled off, which I think we'll see by the end of the year, first part of next, I think the recovery will be, everybody wants to get back out there. I think the recovery will be pretty quick, understanding. And the other thing it's revealed is how used people have gotten to be that they can spin things and, fake news and this is all, just a hoax and this and that. And that has been the most astonishing thing to me. And people have died over it, died from it. That, of course, I am married to a scientist, but, as you and I were talking earlier, my attitude is follow the science. And if the science says a pandemic is going to spread like it spread in the United States, called geometric progression 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, then that's what it's going to do. And if the scientists say if you open too early and people start going to bars and whatever, the virus is going to explode, that's what happened here, because no one listened. So, you can't shout at the virus, you can't threaten it, you can't stand on a soapbox and say, I have my rights. Well, you do. You have your right to get infected, as long as you don't have the right to infect me. So when the virus comes in, I'll tell you, Anthony, my attitude is, I'll get vaccinated, as will my family, and if somebody else doesn't want to get vaccinated, okay. Fine with me. You want to take a chance on dying? As long as you can't infect me, I'm great with that. You want to exercise.
Well, yeah. Look, okay, Wayne. So I'm getting what you're saying. You are obviously in favour of the vaccine, and that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
As long as you said just then, that people have the option. It's not going to be forced on people. I mean, for example, there was the flu vaccine. People do not have to take the flu vaccine if they don't wish to.
No.
So as long as it's not something which gets enforced on people and they don't have free will, then I can go along with what you're saying.
Yeah, my attitude, Anthony, is that if we've got a vaccine that can protect people from catching it, and people want to believe COVID is all a hoax, or they think vaccines are some kind of plot by the Illuminati or the United Nations or Bill Gates to put microchips in everybody's brain. I mean, if people believe that and they don't want to take the vaccine, works for me. It's just Darwin at work, I mean, I don't have any problem with that. As long as what I got a problem now with masks and the rest of it is that if everybody doesn't cooperate, other people can be infected. And I believe that you, for example, we have a right to do whatever we want, but we don't have a right to drive our car at 100 miles an hour through a schoolyard. We don't have the right to drive drunk. We don't have the right to do that. So as long as somebody doesn't proclaim they have a right which can get me and mine hurt or killed, I'm fine with whatever they want to do. Somebody doesn't want to take the vaccine, don't take it. That works for me. You don't believe COVID exists? Okay, don't get vaccinated. That works. I don't care. And then if you get sicker and die, then maybe you shouldn't expect society to put you in a hospital and pay your bills.
Yeah. No, I think that's a kind of a reasonable statement to make, and that's fine. I mean, I'm only going to put things in the picture by saying that according to statistics, we're only looking at a tiny percentage of population who are susceptible. And out of those people, of course, it's mainly people who are already, have a health condition which is already debilitating to their immune system.
Well, Anthony, I don't want to get into the weeds with you on that kind of thing, but I read the reports too and the analysis, and I read the last report from the Lancet, and our experience here in the States is that the deaths we've had here, 160,000 people, are all directly from COVID, not from underlying conditions. And now 40% of new cases are children, people below the age of 20. That's happening here because we're the stupidest country on earth right now in terms of handling the virus. Look what Britain is doing. You guys went from a big peak and now you're knocking it down because you're doing the right thing.
Okay.
Here, yeah, you are. And here, look at the United States. You know, it's just, there's a joke now in the United States that what borders on stupidity? Canada and Mexico.
That's a good one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this political discussion, I mean, it's so controversial, and everybody has their own view. So, I would say that we do see eye to eye quite well on that, and people might never fully agree with one another. That's the way it is, and I think we've got to accept that, haven't we?
Well, it's hard for me because I'm always right.
Ah, so, I didn't know that.
Yeah. No, difficult for me to accept that, but you're
all right. Okay. Anyway, Wayne, it's good to get your views, and of course, the theme of this podcast is changing world, and judging from your stories, there's things that have happened to you back in those days, which those things probably couldn't happen in this day and age, because of changes in regulations and changes in the way we operate and everything. I mean, some of those things just can't be repeated, can they?
Nope, you're exactly correct. A lot of this stuff, you're right, it couldn't. Same thing with, I'm sure, things that have happened in your life. You go along and things happen and society changes, and you're absolutely correct about that. Yeah, a lot of the stuff, the stories, I'm kind of looking at them here, and yeah, you're exactly right. They are not, but the people coming up now are going to have their own stuff to tell. I have no doubt.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so. I mean, one thing that does concern me is that people are getting more and more kind of technology focused. They're always tapping away on the little phones and in their own little world. I mean, do you think that's a change for the better or for the worse? I mean, what's your view on all this?
On balance, I would say I'm looking at you right now on a large Apple screen.
Okay.
And you're in England, I'm in the States, and we're talking like you're right next door. You're in a room next door. I also know that no matter what I'm curious about, most times I can get on Google or whatever, and I can find an answer to it. So I think, and also, if I want to take a course on whatever I want to take it on, it's out there, and usually it's free. So I think on balance, it's a good thing. What I think is not a good thing is I think that with what's happening, if our educational institutions don't teach skepticism and deductive logic and reasoning and being able to look at some outrageous statement and say, what's the source of that? What are you basing that on?
Yeah.
You know, and educating people that YouTube is not a news source. And the, what's it called in England? The Sun, the tabloid?
Oh, yeah.
You know, yeah, that's not a news source. You know, I think that's the thing that distresses me most. I don't see that kind of, although some schools are teaching it now, but I think analytical and critical thinking, that, you know, looking at a device and just because somebody puts up something that says the virus is a fake doesn't mean it's true.
No.
Just because you can read it on the screen, you know?
Exactly.
Any more than if you read something that says the virus is going to kill everybody. That's not true either.
No.
So the question, and that's what I worry about, is that the kids coming up aren't being taught that kind of skepticism and critical thinking. Well, I saw it on YouTube. Well, whoop-de-doo. You know?
Yeah, that's an important point, Wayne. I mean, we still have to be able to think for ourselves. And, you know, it does tie in with what I said earlier, which I do believe in freedom of choice, the freedom to choose. So in other words, the freedom, like you're saying, to analyze first and use deductive reasoning and then say, based on that, I'm going to choose such and such.
Yes.
I think that's a good way to approach things. Not necessarily just to run with the crowd, but to just stop and say, let's just step back and try and analyze it and see what the conclusion really is.
Yeah, I think that's our responsibility as citizens. Yeah.
Well, that's really, I suppose, wraps things up, doesn't it, Wayne? I mean, it's certainly been entertaining listening to you.
Well, I've enjoyed every bit of it. I appreciate the shot.
Well, that's great, Wayne, and you certainly got a few plugs in for your book.
Oh, you mean Tales from the Day?
That's the one. So I think you should be more than happy.
Well, thank you, Anthony, very much.
Well, I'd like to say thank you to you, Wayne, for being being entertaining and sharing all your stories with us, because everybody's got something unique, haven't they, about them, and that's great. So that about wraps it up, and thanks to everybody for listening. And
go have a pint or two on me.
All right, yeah, I think I'll do that. Okay, Wayne, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.